Hiya.
Hello, Derek. And Katie's here as well. All right, so in this session, we're going to go over frequently asked questions for self-practice, create a safe space, and the healing self-practice. So this one, unlike the previous Q&A, this one we have things that we're going to like we came up with a list of things people typically ask us, and I'm gonna kind of go over the answers I would normally give. When Cedric comes back in after letting people in the other room, he'll give his responses to these questions as well. But you know how it is in here, it's casual. You guys can jump in with any questions that you have or ask us to elaborate on anything or share your insights that you have from practice as well.
Yeah, cool.
All right, so let's see. So the first one that we thought of, it's kind of like the base question, why should I practice? And this is something, and a lot of these questions too, like if you're really into yin yoga, you don't have to be a teacher to encounter these questions from people. If someone's like, you did a what this weekend? You can be like, oh, it's yin yoga, and have to have some kind of a spiel to give them. So when people are kind of curious, like why should they practice? It's something that people will, to a large degree, have to kind of figure out like what their reasons for coming to anything is. But generally, some of the things that yin yoga does, I always like two things are kind of central to me: what it does for the nervous system, and what it does for people's body awareness. To me, those are the two most important things. It does all kinds of other stuff, and you can focus on many kind of qualities to a yin practice. But I find that there's nothing in society, at least that I've encountered kind of growing up, that does for these two aspects what yin yoga does. So like the nervous system, it has like those two sides, the fight or flight and the rest and restore. And it's almost like society trains us to be really great at the fight or flight stuff. Like we've got that pretty well like going on in us. But the rest and restore mode, it's not something people are like accustomed to tapping into or even realize that there are two sides. Like, and you can kind of see how we're not taught this, because if you look at another system, the respiratory system, there's anaerobic and aerobic. And most people kind of have an idea of like, oh, okay, one happens when I run and exercise a lot, and the other one is when I'm not. And if you run a lot or get your respiratory system switching between those two modes, you can actually feel that switch over. So like you can kind of feel like if you're running or biking or whatever kind of exercise that is making your respiratory system work, there's often a moment where you're like huffing and puffing and huffing and puffing, and then you're like, oh, I'm doing the same thing, but suddenly the breathing just became like fluid. And so we can recognize that, and we're taught that in school, and people are kind of accustomed to hearing about it. With the nervous system, you can feel that switch over as well. Like you can feel when you switch over into that rest and restore mode. And I usually like to associate it or kind of point out, it's that moment when you have that sigh, that like almost like if you've ever seen a dog like circle its spot, that it's like, I'm going to sit here, and it circles around and it finally crashes down and goes and just lets it all go, and you're like, oh, it's settled in now. Like we have that in us too. And so yeah, you know that, right?
Hi.
Hey, Cedric. So when we settle into that moment where we kind of have that sigh, and sometimes you'll notice it, sometimes you won't, but you can start to, if you practice yin yoga a lot, recognize the more of the nuanced inner feeling that comes with that sigh, or that triggers that sigh. And that's your nervous system switching over. So like why to practice is, for that alone, is just an enormous wealth of value, because then you can recognize when you're not in that system, and be like, oh, I'm not in my rest and restore mode. I don't need to be in fight or flight. I'm sitting at a cafe having like some tea. This is not a dangerous situation. So you can kind of be like, okay, let me calm myself down. And that's immensely valuable, just to human existence. And then the other one is the body awareness. And this one has like just so many qualities to it. But it's like we live in this thing our whole life. like to not have a nuanced kind of sense of awareness of it is kind of like, well, like, what are we going through then if we're not like tapped into this sensory machine? And so yin yoga kind of gets us to where like we can notice things more subtly earlier on. And it's hard to test because it's subjective. So you can't quite say like, well, I would never have noticed that injury about to happen 10 years ago before I practiced yin yoga, because how do you compare that? But I find, and again, it's just a subjective, like anecdotal feeling, that I've noticed more limitations before an injury happens, or I've noticed more things in my yang practices. Like when I would go and like do weightlifting or something for a while at the gym, my knees, I would notice before the injury happened that something doesn't feel right. Like all these squats with heavy weights or whatever, I don't know what that is in my knee. It's super subtle, but it's not going in the direction I want it to go in terms of the sensation that's developing there. And that subtle awareness of sensation can occur for all kinds of things. When a cold is coming on much earlier than before it just takes over and makes you sick and you miss work for like half a week. So that body awareness is just so useful for catching things before they become a problem in your body and kind of dealing with it, making changes that need to be made earlier on, and avoiding things that could have gotten worse. So I find those two reasons are probably valuable enough for why should I practice yin as a question. So Cedric, that was the first question we were chatting about as far as like frequently asked questions. Why should I practice?
Yeah. Can you make me as a co-host?
Oh, sure, yeah. Let me see.
That would be delightful.
You get to be a co-host. Everybody gets to be a co-host. There we go. Did that work?
No, that was the wrong one.
Let me try. Oh, that was the wrong account. Let's try this one. How about now?
Yes, thank you.
Perfection. So if you have any thoughts on like why should I practice as a frequently asked question, otherwise we will head to question 2. Or if anyone wants follow-up stuff, jump in. So for this,
just say something. Whenever anybody asks me why I practice, I always just come back with the simple response, because it's relaxing.
yeah.
It's relaxing. That's all you need to know, really.
Yeah, I like that. That's like the elevator pitch one. You got to sell yin yoga to someone. You got until they get to the second floor.
Yeah, actually, yeah, I also totally agree. And it's just, it sounds so simple and there's so much behind it. Like being relaxed is not just a state that everybody can tap into easily, or that is able to have for a long time. Sometimes even if we do nothing, and that over a long period of time, we still can feel very agitated or like stressed, or like we're having billion conversations in mind. Like just to relax is more than it sounds.
Yeah.
I don't think I was ever fully relaxed in my life before I discovered yoga.
Yeah. It's incredible, right? And I tell people sometimes like it's like active relaxation, because like Cedric was saying, sometimes we label things that we think are relaxing in our life, but like me sitting on the couch like watching political YouTube videos is not relaxing, but I'm just like, this is my chill time, but I'm still kind of like, I don't feel like more released afterwards. So like yin yoga is kind of like you're actively participating in getting more and more relaxed. Sometimes like the type A people like to hear that active part, active relaxation. Okay, I'll try it. Anyone else? Hi, Katie.
Hello. I really like, Derek, that you just like keep it that simple, because I way overcomplicate things. Like my elevator pitch is like how much information about the fascia can I get in 30 seconds? And so I think that's great. Just like if I were to try to simplify it for people, I think talking about the relaxation piece, but also just this like really necessary balance to everything else we do, you know, like we just don't. And I think what you were saying, TJ, this body awareness, that's probably the most important piece of all of the yogic practices. I teach vinyasa as well. And but particularly my favorite benefit of yin is that like that tuning in and being able to like stop injury before it starts, being able to like totally, like you said, I feel like I'm so connected to my body. I can feel a cold, like I always say I feel it in my bones first, like it just settled into my bones, and I'm still fine, but like it's there. So yeah, I mean, I think that just giving people this like, hey, this is something that can really help balance everything else you're doing, so that you feel, you know, like I don't know, a more well-rounded human.
Yeah,
That's what I have to offer you.
I want to add also my reason is to have time. For me, this is like, wow, I have time for myself, actually. Time for myself. Often we just don't take time for just enjoying ourselves. And that's something so important.
Yeah. And I like what Katie said too about like, it helps everything. Like sometimes you can, if someone asks you like, why should I do yin yoga? Be like, well, what do you want to get better at? Like, well, I'd like to be able to lift more weights. Yin yoga will help you do that. Like, not because it's helping you lift weights, but because it's helping you like recover from the lifting of weights and stuff like that, you know?
TJ, we should create a commercial, an ad out of the answers of these questions we go through.
Yeah,
it's like no
sure.
one will ever not choose to do yin yoga anymore because it helps for everything.
And I like like Derek's like saying just like it relaxes you. If that's not a good enough reason, like if someone is like, no, I don't want to be relaxed, then it's like, well, okay, we can't help you then.
No, that's true. It kind of weeds out the people that like just aren't gonna enjoy the practice, right? I think that's that's really nice. I totally forgot that I made a whole social media post around this, trying to get people to come to like to value yin in the way I do. And yeah, it was like I could put 25 bullet points on here, but like improved sleep, you know, improved digestion, just everything that's improved by taking time to like actively get into the parasympathetic nervous system, essentially, right? But like they don't know what that means.
I've got one bullet point for you that you need. Improves life.
Excellent. I'm taking notes.
And Pia, hi to you too as well. Like if you're like shy or like don't want to chat with the mute off, you can type in the chat box too. We keep it really casual in the premium room. So the next question, frequently asked question is, how do I decide what poses I should do? So again, these are like questions that, oh, yeah. So that's Cedric's mom. Hi, Cedric's mom. Dude, my mom would be in here too, though. Like if she knew like what link it was, I don't think she could find it. So these are just like questions that students ask us a lot of times. How do I decide what poses I should do? So I find for this one, and I think we've answered it in some of the group discussions as well. There's like so many approaches that you can take. Like for me, when I teach beginners or like someone yin for the first time, there's usually a few poses where I'm like, okay, this pose doesn't need a lot of props. It's very easy to support yourself or like modify your position with your arms. Or it's like on your back and there's just, you're kind of like flopping one way or the other. So I have some poses where I'm like, I like offering them in classes because I never know if there's going to be a beginner in that class. And that's just for those reasons. But there are some, like technically any pose that's done with a yin yoga principles and kind of mind state, like an application of trying to listen to your body, not like endure pain, or extreme discomfort and release muscle tension, you can put your body into any position doing that and you will be okay. Sometimes it takes a little bit of training to actually like really listen to the body, but the principle applied to any body position is safe. So that's like my thoughts on like how to decide what poses to do in general. What about all you guys? What thoughts do you have?
I took a yin class in London once, and she taught Parasarita Padottanasana. So she taught us standing wide leg forward fold in the yin class. And I am admittedly very flexible, right? But it was the way that she offered the propping for everybody. It was pretty accessible for everybody in the room. And sure, it was a lot more like yang than if we were just sitting in straddle, right? Or dragonfly. But that's pretty damn yang for a lot of people anyway. And I thought it was really interesting, but it is interesting to hear like you specifically say, you know, in a class where you're not sure if you're going to have beginners or what level people are at, you're teaching like low prop use, you know, or easily modified postures. Because, you know, when you teach yin every week or multiple times a week in a group class setting, you're like, okay, well, I'm kind of bored of teaching butterfly pose and, you know, not teaching saddle, because that's just, it's really hard to prop everybody in the room for something like saddle, when likely you've got people that are just not, you know, that flexible in the knee joint, the ankle joint, whatever. But I like what you say too about it's not as black and white as like these 13 poses are the yin poses, you know, and everything else is yang, is hatha or vinyasa or ashtanga or anusara or kundalini or jivamukti or whatever, like letting the principle be the guiding sort of rule for what is yin and what's appropriate in a yin practice.
Yeah. And it's weird to try to figure out because everybody's body is so different. So it's like, there are poses in some of the books, like Bernie Clark's book has, I think it's grasshopper pose or what's the pose where you like flip on, it's like shoulder stand, but your feet are over your head on the floor.
Oh, like plow, but I don't know what they call it. Yeah.
Snail. I call it
snail. That's right.
Yeah. That's in a yin yoga, the yin yoga book. Like, but yeah. I'm like, not for everybody. That's not yin.
Oh,
I taught it once. And it was like, I had to go around and prop every single person, and half the class was just like, nope.
Yeah. It's a very, very, it's an advanced posture, but it can be so beautiful. I love this posture. But afterwards, I need a long, like neutral pose to really get back.
Yeah. If I tell people things, if it's accessible to you, like you can try it. Because in the trainings, we try every single pose, all the students. And I tell them when we get to plow, I'm like, we're not going to do this. Like I like it, like my body's okay in it, but I'm like, if this isn't something you do in a yang class, don't ever try it like for the first time in a yin class. It's an interesting one.
It's so interesting too, speaking directly to this book, because I was actually thinking about this last night, how the images in the book, the photo, you know, photo, like these people are all hypermobile and or they've been practicing their entire lives, and the demonstrations of a lot of like, sure, okay, I'm just open to the reclining twists, like whatever, that's fine, but like a lot of these other postures, it's tricky because the people that are coming to a yin class specifically in a studio setting, or even if you've got people that you've, you know, recruited for like your online classes or whatever, these people aren't hypermobile people. They're coming to yin, and most of them are coming in because they think it's going to make them more flexible, and it will help with flexibility in time. But I think it's interesting, you know, when we see stuff like a full ankle stretch, you know, where she's really lifted, and you're like, 95% of my people are going to have some serious pain. Right.
Yeah, it's wild.
So just meeting people where they are and letting what you said, TJ, just that yin principle be the guiding principle, I think is so important. And like letting go of like, this is yin or that's yang, you know, that polarity, that need for, you know, labeling things.
it's more a state than a physical position.
I'm gonna quote you on that. I'll make it sound fancier.
Pia has a question. What do you think of yin yoga on a chair for older people when they can? Yeah, this is for sure something that's possible, and it could actually be a whole book in itself, probably, because it'd be really interesting to kind of go through each pose and figure out how to use a chair to get the same stretches. But it's certainly possible. It would just take some knowledge of the poses in order to figure out what targets you're trying to get to. What do you think of that one, Cedric?
I think we should do a workshop next summit to especially target that, because I think it's a big group of people who could benefit from that and who need that. And especially the people who have problems by sitting on the floor can just improve their life quality so much through having more flexibility. So it's definitely a big topic, yeah. And there will be many variations that are possible, I guess. Tricky could be the backbending part, because that's what most people need the most. The iliopsoas is often shortened, especially when you sit a lot, and you need to stretch that. So I would focus also on those areas to stretch the iliopsoas, that the hip flexor, and also to open somehow the back body. I mean, to open the front body and strengthen, or compress the back body.
Everybody just needs really short back chairs.
It would almost
just get a whole bunch of short back chairs so that you can get people backwards on them like this.
Yeah.
You could sit backwards on a regular chair, so you're holding the back of it, and then be near a wall. So you just kind of have the wall as far away as you need to lean back while you're holding on to the back of the chair. It'd be really fun. I'm so curious about this now. Let's all brainstorm a chair yin class.
That's your homework for next summit.
Yeah. You guys
I love it.
Try a nice comfy recliner.
Yeah. Everyone bring their BYOC, bring your own chair. So the next question.
Can I answer the second one again, because I haven't had a time to answer to that. It's very quick. I just want to share that because I have good experience with that. How do I decide what pose should I do, especially if I don't know the people or if nothing comes intuitively to my mind? I often go for the principle of using the spine as a reference and then going to all directions the spine can move. So I try to bring in a twist, I try to bring in a fold, a back bend, and a side bend. And that's basically what our spine can do as a movement. And the main, to keep it healthy, one main function is to move your spine and in all directions it can move. So you actually give or pass on benefits for everybody, and it's not dangerous in a way, so you don't need to go fancy. You can do banana or something, and many people do the side bends very, very little. So that's like my advice or my sharing to this question.
Yeah, I like that too. And then next one, we kind of almost answered this one, I think, in the last premium class. How can I stop procrastinating and start a session? Because we had some of those little tips and tricks, like starting a session by the potato chip method, and just doing one pose and then you're into it, or just hitting the start button for your timer. And Cedric, I tried to do justice to your potato box idea, but I don't know if I quite did. Do you want to explain that one?
No, I'm sure you explained it in a way you understood
it. I liked hearing your explanation. And then, but if you guys have questions or want us to talk more about that particular question, how to stop procrastinating and start a session, we can revisit that. Oh, a cat has entered the field. A true yin master is among us. So if there's no desire for elaboration on that one, the next question is, how do I know if I am practicing safely? A pose or threshold or alignments, what's the safety? how do I know? And this also kind of goes with, am I doing it right? That's a huge one that we get a lot, like, or I've encountered a lot from students. They want to know if they're doing it right. And that usually just comes down to safety. So Cedric, do you want to start with this one?
Yeah. So because we are all kind of, not all, but yeah, let's assume we are more advanced practitioners and we're practicing for a time already. What happens is that we slowly can find our own posture. So when I go into swan, which is called pigeon, yeah, swan, I turn myself already out of a young style swan and go into my variation of swan, because over time I found out, like, how is swan applicable to me and how can it be safe so I don't twist my knee too much or something. And I just want to make aware that over time we should sometimes forget about what we know and what feels right, and experiment a little again to find different, it can be nuances, but find different positions and use another prop to teach our body now and then to get into a different posture, and always to be in the loop of, yeah, discovering, at the same time, of course, following all these rules of safetyness, which we can maybe mention quickly. But so yeah, that's basically it. So finding your posture is a process, and to do that, you need to follow the safety instructions. That means basically you don't pull yourself, you don't push yourself. I guess most of you knows what the safety instructions are, but I can repeat it and DJ can add something. So don't pull and push. Go into the posture until you feel something, until you feel a stretch, and then wait for a few seconds, 30, 60 seconds. And then slowly in this time, your muscles basically start to release bit by bit. And then you just use the gravity and your body weight to get more into that posture. If you feel a pinching pain somewhere, like in the knee or something where you can put your finger on, then most of the time this is a sign for this is a bit too much. Sometimes if you ask people, do you feel pain? Then they say no. You can even ask them on a scale 1 to 10, how much is the stretch? Like, how much is the pain of the stretch? And they say probably 4 or 5. And they are actually 1 to, like, they are on 9, and on 10 they would rip their muscle apart. So sometimes pain is, if it doesn't kill me, it's not enough. So we have to be very careful with that pain threshold. So in Yin, I would recommend to back up a little bit more than you think you should. And that refers to the aim. Where do I want to get? Do I want to get flexible? And you think more is better? Then it's sometimes a bit, difficult. Yeah, did I forget something? Compression for me. Compression is a big thing, especially in my back. We say in Yin Yoga we want to release and relax everything we can relax, and in my back pains, sometimes that means I compress too much. So I have to activate certain areas of my body, especially in the sphinx. Can you see here? Yeah. So when I'm in the sphinx too long, I just feel pain in my lower back because my discs are too close. So what I need to do is a little bit to tuck my tailbone, to draw my belly in, and to bring my elbows, like pull them back without moving them, but pulling them back. So that brings my chest a little bit forward and takes out the compression in the lower back. That's something I learned to slowly introduce for a bit of a time, maybe a minute, and then I can start to relax again. So that helps me to lengthen kind of the structure and then relax into it again. Lengthen a little bit, relax. And that takes out the compression pain, which is sometimes a little bit too much.
I have that same experience in like puppy pose, anahata asana, whatever you want to call it in Yin, sometimes quarter dog, half dog, whatever. because I'm so hypermobile in the shoulders that I can just dump my chest down and then I get that same compression in the low back. And it was, you know, after, this was years ago when I very first started practicing yin, and I finally got up, you know, the guts to ask my teacher after class, like, what do I do about this? This is awful. Like, I feel like I can't settle. I'm constantly fidgeting. And she kind of blew my mind by saying, well, like, I guess for you, you have to activate a little bit. And in a group setting, she's not going to cue that necessarily, or she hadn't, because that's not everybody's experience. But then when I did a training with her and a couple other teachers, you know, a year later, they were all like, oh yeah, you're just super hypermobile. And I didn't even know, I didn't even realize how hypermobile I was in that shoulder joint. And I think it just goes back to like it not being so black and white, you know?
Yeah.
The other thing that you spoke to, Cedric, that I really wanted to touch on was the, you know, like figuring out where your edge is. I think it was helpful for me as kind of a recovering type A, and I like to bring this into class sometimes. If you can't figure out like where your 70% is, take it all the way to your max and then pull it back, because that gives people a point of reference. You know what I mean? And then allowing them like, go ahead, go all the way there, but let's pull it back and here's why. I think is really helpful for me in my practice to like kind of put that on repeat. Like, are you at a 7, or are you really at a 10, Katie? Let's be honest about this. And then using that when I cue as well is really helpful in finding like, you know, where it is and what pose I should be doing.
I think that touches on a little bit too of like the kind of student that you're dealing with. And one of my teachers gave these 2 archetypes. She said there's pandas and there's samurai. And you're gonna get students who are on one side or the other or are blended in the spectrum. And she's like, pandas aren't gonna wanna feel anything, or they're gonna cover themselves in props and basically be doing restorative yoga where there's nothing going on because any sensation is too much. And then there's gonna be who are like samurai, who are like shot up with arrows and are still charging into battle. Like, so they're in a pose and like nothing
guilty. Yep.
Yeah. So like, so that I find is helpful in terms of if you can decide like where you're at. So if you're kind of a panda and you're kind of not giving yourself any sensation, but doing restorative yoga, that is fine. But if you want to do yin, if you want to like be stretching the tissues and compressing the tissues, then make sure you're giving yourself maybe a little more than you think you should as a panda. If you're a samurai, and you're kind of always stretching and pulling and trying to get there, and what's my furthest I can go, then maybe recognize that you're kind of have a samurai mindset and be like, you know, I'm starting to do Ashtanga. Like,
right.
Like ease back and relax. And I know Derek likes those elevator pitch answers. So like, I've got a good one for this one. So if someone's like wondering if they're doing it correctly or how to practice safely, one thing I've noticed is a really good cue that seems to resonate is if you can't relax in the pose, and by that I mean if you can't let muscle tension go, because your body's intuitively going to protect you if it thinks something's not right, and that's something you kind of you're always working with, because sometimes things aren't right. Like your muscles might be active because like your knee is not going to be safe in this position if you let go of that tension, and the tension is keeping it like locked in and safe in that moment. And so if that tension won't go away, and as you feel maybe letting it go away, some increase in sensation in the joint, then it's kind of like, okay, that's not what it's supposed to be. I can't relax or it starts to hurt, or I can't relax or something feels compromised. So that kind of quick, simple cue of like, if you can't release muscle tension in the pose, you're probably not in the position your body is okay with. That tends to be a good signal. Not universal, but generally speaking.
Yeah, and the breath, of course. So if you go too deep into a posture, my breath is increasing in speed. It's a very simple way. If you can, for some beginners, it's difficult, but if you can observe the breath, you will feel that your breath is changing and getting faster. And it's a good and simple cue to say, if your breath goes faster, you're too deep, just back up a little bit.
And the next question, and some of these, like there might not be too much explanation, but they're interesting questions to contemplate because they do come up with people asking about yin. What do I do if I can't relax or focus? And that's kind of related to like that monkey mind, like your mind is always just bouncing around. And like my response to that is, well, I'll give my response and then I'll give like the Zen response. So my response is like, that's just kind of how it is. Like you don't have, I mean, you should be able to kind of make your way to a relaxed state. Like you're training to do that. That's the practice. So that might develop time after time. You don't have to say like, oh, I just can't relax, I'm a tense person. Like, well, yeah, that's why we're doing yin. It's kind of like saying I can't do yoga because I'm not flexible. It's like, well, that's why we're doing yoga. And the focus part is kind of just, it's like any day's meditation is going to be what it's going to be. You try your best to stay focused on the sensations in the body and coming back to that. But your mind is going to bounce around. That's just kind of how minds work. Now, the Zen answer to that question is if you can't relax or focus, then like practice more. Like, so it's like, if you can't sit for an hour, then you should sit for 2 hours. Like that's how like they respond in Zen. It's a little not kind of a yin vibe, but as far as the monkey mind goes, it's like you just practice more trying to focus and you'll get better at focusing. Cedric or anyone thoughts on that?
Yeah. I like to refer very much in this question to the two different ways of meditation. And for me, we have this young approach of silence in our head. And that leads to pressure, that leads to, I have to achieve silence. What is speaking there in my head is not correct. And I have to focus on the breath, or I'm not allowed to have thoughts. I'm not allowed to like go and explore what I want to eat tonight, because the practice is to breathe and be in silence. And sometimes that's a hurdle that creates so much pressure and keeps you actually away from quietening the mind in the end. So my approach is to refer to the yin way of meditation, which is actually an open awareness. That's how I call it, or that's how many people like describe it. And open awareness means actually you're allowed to, whatever comes up, to get it and to lose yourself in that. That's how I fall asleep. If I want to sleep, they're coming like thoughts up. If I allow myself to follow them, to like explore, to give me the time to think about things, like they are coming sometimes for a reason, and often they are superficial and there are layers underneath that want to be seen. And sometimes you have to go first through that layers which are superficial and asking yourself like, what do I eat tonight? What do I answer to this problem? How do I solve this and this and this? And then slowly you have answered all of that and you gave yourself that space. Slowly things coming up that are probably important needs to be processed. It's like sometimes it's not even thoughts, sometimes it's emotions or feelings or whatever. And yeah, to have this allowance to say, it's okay to think and to not be focused. I'm doing yin yoga. The only thing I need to do is put my body into this shape. That's everything you achieved, done. Whatever now is happening, just stay. If you stay in the shape, you have achieved, done. And that helped me a lot to have a second idea of meditation and becoming silent.
I like that a lot. It's
I
easy
love
to
it.
forget that. Yeah. It's kind of like the reason we go for walks in the woods or something, just for our mind to process all the stuff that's in there. And yeah, yin yoga can be that too.
Totally. I mean, how many like big problems have you know, all of a sudden had clarity on the mat, right? Or like something big that just shifted because you had that space. And I really like what you're saying, Cedric, because I think my initial response to this question as a teacher was, well, I give them a tool, I give them a breath counting exercise at the beginning of class, and then I'll cue, you know, if your mind is really, you know, spinning, maybe utilize that breath to give your brain something to do, kind of go back to counting the breath. But I like that. I just love this. That's going to shift the way I teach this, just letting people, giving them permission and myself permission to just let it, just follow it sometimes, you know, let it go wherever it's going to go. It's awesome.
I want to create a word that like giving permission or allowance, that needs to become like into a new word.
I think there probably is a word for that in either Japanese or Tibetan. Those two languages have some wildly great words to apply to this kind of stuff.
One thing I learned a lot from the guided meditations that I do is it's okay if I can't necessarily relax or focus, or if my mind wanders, I just, as long as I notice that it's wandered, I can bring it back. I can sort of say, okay, I've had that thought. That's a thought. I'll remember that for later. Now come back to the breath and back to the meditation or the practice or whatever I'm doing.
The idea of becoming the witness and not like, and not being like, you know, identifying yourself by the thoughts themselves, but recognizing that you are part separate from them.
Yeah.
The observer of the observer.
Mm-hmm.
I must achieve enlightenment, Derek. Your comment is hilarious.
Yeah, I love that. So the next question that comes up sometimes is, I don't have time. How long does a practice need to be? And I think this one, we kind of like with the potato chip method have some understanding, like it can be 5 minutes, just one pose. But anyone else have any other thoughts on that one? If someone came to you with that question.
I think any time is better than none.
Yeah.
That's it. That would be my answer. Like any amount of time that you can sit in meditation, any amount of time that you can sit in stillness in a posture, any amount of time that you can disengage from, you know, the material world or the you know, your when you can sit and become the witness, it's better than nothing, and it's effective. Any amount of time is effective.
Yeah, for sure. So next one, when should I, and also I'm trying to get through a few more of these just before the time runs out. When should I practice and in what sequence of other activities? I think this came up in one of the discussions today. I forget what we were talking. Oh, were we talking about like the boot camp or something? And it was Derek, and he was like, "Oh, yin after boot camp would be really nice." And I think like that's a fun thing to explore. There's almost really no real answer for it, because like because putting a yin practice, I mean, I've tried this lately to mix it in with like my routines I've been doing at the gym or qigong, and I personally have found that when I do yin before, I feel a bit too loosey-goosey with like the practices that need me to be a little bit more sharp and on point, that I do after it, that are more active. So I've started kind of doing yin as like an after practice. I try not to do it before. And I tried mixing it in the middle and seeing how that works. But I think every body is going to have a different experience of that, depending on what practices they're trying to mix it with. It's a really fun question to explore with yin yoga. Do you guys have thoughts or how you mix yin?
I have a question to ask you and Cedric your opinion on this, the idea that we should do yin cold, that we shouldn't be doing yin when the muscles are warm.
Yeah.
Or that, yeah.
Yeah,
if you can
good
speak
question.
to that.
Because that's mostly what we hear, do yin cold and first. And I also agree on that, but I have some other ideas why it can be beneficial if you have a different order of doing yin yoga or when to put your yin yoga. So why do we say that? Normally we say that because we want to stretch into the fascia. And fascia is the most responsive when we have it cold. That means when no blood is in it. And if we do first the yang style, then our muscles get stretched and a lot of blood is in the muscles. And what that makes is that our fascia around it gets very flexible as well. So when we then go into a yin stretch, we don't address the fascia around the muscle anymore. We more stretch the end bits, which is the ligaments and the tendons. And if we are not And at the same time, because we are warm, we are quite more flexible. So we tend to go deeper, and we don't stretch the fascia in between. We're just stretching the ligaments and the tendons in the end, which are so more
Plastic?
Yeah, not elastic, like they are so more tight.
Plastic.
Plastic.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And injured, more likely to be injured. So the chance of injuring ourselves is decreasing. That's why we always say, let's first go into yin, because the muscles are cold, there's not so much blood in, and we address actually the big fascia, the belly of the fascia, which is around the muscles. And that's why we say first yin and then yang. But here comes the but. This is the physiological order of things, how to stay safe for our body. If we think in terms of our mind, I, for example, I like to be relaxed in the beginning, then do a bit of yang, and then have a long, relaxed stretching in a yin style. And that brings me very deeply into yin postures, because my body feels good and is warm. And sometimes, depends where you put your focus on, sometimes it's more important to relax people than to have the bodily effect of a good stretch or something. So at the same time, on an energetic level, maybe it's better to calm down the energetics afterwards, after a yang practice or something. And you have a more refined awareness of your body. So it depends on from what perspective you're looking at. If we want to stay safe and healthy, and as a yoga teacher, we don't want to have bring our students into danger or unsafety environment, then it's more safe to practice yin at first.
I always like to think too about climates. Like when I'm thinking about temperature in regards to these practices, it's so easy to forget that, like, if someone is in like a climate that's just sweltering hot and they're just always warm, their tissues are just going to be like, that's just how they are, because that's the temperature in that climate. Whereas like if somebody's in a super cold climate and they have to be all bundled up to practice and everything's cold and tight. So it's interesting to think of that. Sometimes it's not an artificial application of whether you're practicing warm or cold. It's a matter of like what environment you're in.
Same time as the day, time of the day. In the morning, it is the best for the body. In the evening, we have moved so much, so everything is already really elastic, and that can lead to more easy injuries. So in the morning and cold.
Yeah. Well, I teach for someone else to essentially their student base, and she has asked me, I had somebody sub last month, and whoever subbed taught like a gentle flow first and then yin. And I was like, damn it. Because now she wants me to switch up how I'm teaching because the students responded to it. And I was like, well, of course they responded to it. It feels better. It feels better for the ego to be able to get deeper into a stretch. It's more comfortable. But I felt a little pushback there because I was like, but that's not what we're here to do, especially because, like you said, Cedric, this class is happening at 8 o'clock at night. I mean, I teach this class once a month at 7:30 p.m., so I'm trying to figure out this balance between giving the students what they want, a little bit of warm up of the muscles before they go into the stretch, and like really giving them an effective practice that's going to target the fascial planes and not just, have an aesthetically kind of pleasing stretch. So I don't know, just thinking about that.
Like
to answer that, there are also, you can adapt your practice a little bit in order to probably have a little bit of activation still cued. So if you go into a yin stretch, maybe you do a yin stretch the yang way, but like 50-50. So you still say like engage or flex your toes or your feet or something. So you just make sure they cannot injure their knee when they're in pigeon or in swan or something. And the other thing is like probably the warm up. could focus on different areas, you really go deep into.
Ooh, I like that. You let them feel like they're getting a warm up, but just do it on the shoulders, and then we'll do all low body again.
I mean, it just works halfway because you warm up the whole body, but you don't go deep into the stretch. You further go deep into it.
Yeah. That's awesome. Thank you for that advice, Cedric. Thank you.
Sure.
And sometimes too, like I've had situations where the studios always want like more students to attend, and sometimes the practices just like they are what they are. Like, because I was teaching a Zazen meditation class at a yoga studio, and it was like, we got to make this exciting, we got to get more people in the door. It was always like the studio's like side of it, and to me it was like I can't make Zazen anything other than Zazen. Like, you come in there and it's like you deal with the shit in your head, and it's like you can, you know, try to maybe give a little something separate from it beforehand or whatnot. But if people aren't taking to the practice because they want something else, it's really hard to make that work. But I mean, I think Cedric gave you some good options to play with.
They're great. Thank you very much. Helpful.
And we're probably out of time here. There's a couple more questions I'll just throw into the chat box in case you guys are curious what these two questions we're gonna, whoops.
I would already say thank you from my side. It was very nice to have actually an exchange. I love that. And I will go to the other room because there is another happening, and see you later. Thanks.
Hi, Cedric.
Hi, Cedric.
Yeah, it's been awesome, these premium rooms with you guys. I really appreciate you guys coming in here. And I think this is the last premium one, but there's like the sharing, if you guys like this format, like there's the sharing circle later. So feel free to stop in there and share with us as we close everything out. But it's been great, like having this little like micro community within the weekend with you guys. I really, truly do appreciate you taking the time and being so interactive. And if you guys have questions in the future, you can always reach out to us in any way. My email address, if you haven't seen it in any of the other rooms, is tjmar@gmail.com. So I love chatting about this. Reach out anytime. And if you want to hop into the other class or take a break, it's up to you. But what is next is Let It Go, Yin Yoga with Natalia. So that sounds like that would be super relaxing if you guys need more yin. Otherwise, I'll see you guys soon.
I'll see you later.
Awesome. Thank you, TJ and Derek. It was great to meet you guys. I wasn't able to attend a lot live, but these 3 sessions were worth every penny, and it's awesome to connect. So it's good to meet you guys.
Good to meet you too.
Me too.
Oh, here, I'm just gonna do it too, just in case we want to stay in touch. So I'm Katie Brown, and my yoga business is KC Yoga, and I'm just gonna throw that in the chat in case you want to copy it. I would love to stay in touch and talk all things yin. Awesome. Yeah, I'll copy yours, Derek, as well.
And we got
Derek, do you teach?
No, I don't. I'm just a student.
I love it. That's awesome.
I've come in on the premium pass just to try and learn as much as I possibly can, really. So.
I love it. Excellent. Awesome.
Yeah, I got your emails. It was great chatting with you guys.
You too. See ya. Bye.